In 2019, a fan-made trailer was released on YouTube, not only showing what the Fresh Prince of Bel-Air would look like if it was released in modern times, but also showing what it would be like if it had a more cinematic look to it. The trailer was done by writer and filmmaker Malcolm Cooper, and for a fan trailer, it was incredibly well done. And if nobody told you that it was a fan trailer, I doubt that you would have known. I was really impressed by the trailer and wanted to see more, and I wasn't the only one, because Will Smith himself saw the trailer and reached out to Cooper, which set in motion the events that would eventually lead to the fan trailer becoming a whole TV show with 10 episodes on a major network. Bel-Air, as it was later known, debuted on the Peacock streaming network in February of 2022, and like the tagline says, it's a reimagining of the original TV show. That's the best way to think about it if you ask me. If you go into it expecting it to be just like the original show, then you may be a little disappointed. I would say that it's best to pretend like the old show doesn't exist while watching Bel-Air. Try your best to imagine a world where there's only this version of the Fresh Prince of Bel-Air, and if you do that, it may make for better viewing. Now me personally, I couldn't do that because I was just coming off of a top 10 video where I had to watch the entire run of the original show, and I was worried about how that would affect my view of the Bel-Air show. But I have to say, despite some shortcomings, I genuinely liked it. Now, I'm not really a big fan of these new type of dark and gritty black shows that have come into popularity recently, like Power and Snowfall and The Chi and others like it, but I do like the new twist that Bel-Air put on the source material, and the overall story it told I thought was pretty good. The first episode of Bel-Air is almost a carbon copy of the fan-made trailer from 2019, and it made for a good starting point to introduce us to the new TV show characters in a more in-depth way. You already know the story. Will Smith gets into it with a gang member at a basketball court, and instead of just fearing for a fight, his mom fears for his life and sends him to live with his aunt. If you're familiar with the old show, then you already know who all the usual suspects are. But they're updated for a more modern, or more appropriately, a younger audience this time, for better or for worse. Will is played by Jabari Banks, and for this to be his only acting credit, dude did an amazing job, and I have to say, he's arguably the best on the show. It doesn't hurt that he kinda looks like a modern day young Will Smith somehow. He balances his emotions effortlessly in the show, and it would be a crime if he didn't get some kind of recognition or at least an award for this. Adrian Holmes as Uncle Phil was probably the most challenging casting, because how can you live up to the greatness of James Avery? Well, you can't, which is why I'm glad that it seems that Adrian Holmes didn't even try. He's a veteran actor in his own right, and I'm glad that he got to put his own stamp on the character. Some people may not like the fact that he's not the no-nonsense but lovable father figure of the original show, but I like the new, more methodical and level-headed version of the character. Even though he's still a lawyer in this show, he plays the role more like a calculated politician than a lawyer. Vivian Banks is played by Cassandra Freeman, who played a similar role on an episode of the TV show Atlanta, which you have to wonder if it factored into her getting this role. She's not as fiery as Janet Hubert, but also not as passive as Daphne Reed was. She's just kind of there. I didn't think she complimented Uncle Phil well in this series at all, and I didn't buy into their marriage. Maybe that was by design, as I'll get into later. Carlton is probably the most controversial of the new characters, not because he's played by Ollie Sholaton, very well by the way, but because he's the biggest departure from the source material. He's arrogant and a complete douchebag, but without all the clueless charm of the Alfonso Ribeiro version of the character. And speaking of clueless, Bel-Air also decided that Hillary didn't need any of that for this version, and made the Coco Jones version of Hillary Banks far more competent than she ever was on The Fresh Prince of Bel-Air. I don't think she asked her father for money even once on this show. It was damn near against her principles. Unfortunately, even though Ashley Banks is here and played by Akira Akbar, just like on some seasons of the original show, she's somewhat pushed to the background, and what little bit of story she does get feels forced. The same can also be said of the butler Jeffrey, played by Jimmy Akinbola. And I say butler in the loosest sense of the word. It's the weirdest departure of all. Jeffrey is more like a secret agent, like an Alfred to Uncle Phil's Batman. If that sounds crazy to you, trust me, it plays out just as crazy as it sounds. Overall, I feel like the casting worked. It feels like everybody was told not to feel handicapped by the reputations of the characters they were portraying, and in the end, that helped them establish new ground for this show and help the moment stand on their own without your mind having to constantly compare them to the previous versions. The show doesn't completely turn its back on its inspiration, and there's plenty of nods to the original show, like Dice being in the mirror in Jazz's car when he drops Will off, and his best friend from Philly being a guy named Trey, just like in the episode in season 1 of The Fresh Prince, when Trey, played by Don Cheadle, takes a liking to Hillary. The Trey in Bel-Air even kind of looks like Don Cheadle a little. There's also subtle nods to characters like Judge Robertson, who was played by Sherman Hemsley in the original show, and cameos by Daphne Reed and Bernie Watson. However, the show isn't perfect, and I don't think anybody really expected it to be, honestly, but I did have some slight issues with it. I made sure that any criticisms I had didn't fall into the comparing it to the original category, because like I said, if you did that, we'd be here all day, and you wouldn't like anything about it. I'm going to be giving some slight spoilers ahead, so if you haven't seen the Bel-Air TV show yet, then stop right here, go watch it, then come back. Did that? Good. So my biggest gripe with the show is its insistence on being dark and negative. It doesn't have to be as funny and positive as the original show, but a little levity would have gone a long way with me. The tone of everything does the show a great disservice, I feel. From Trey getting shot and Will's classmates being racist, to Carlton of all people being on drugs, and Vivian and Phil being insecure in their marriage. It just feels as if Bel-Air set out to drown you in sorrow instead of telling you a compelling story. Most of these issues have no convincing resolution either. The racist classmate never gets any real punishment. Carlton just decides he's just not going to be on drugs anymore. Vivian and Phil come across as too busy to fix their marriage, and it's heavily implied that Jeffrey had the guy who ran Will out of Philly and who shot Trey killed, which is kind of insane, but the show does nothing with it. Jeffrey remains this shadowy figure until the very end. In fairness, a lot of these stories are lifted straight from the old show. Vivian being hit on by the art director is kind of like the episode where she's hit on by a pastor on one of the old episodes. And of course, the overarching story of Will trying to find out about his dad is lifted straight from the episode where Lou shows up out of nowhere. He also shows up out of nowhere in Bel-Air and is played by Marlon Wayans? Well, that was totally unexpected, but dude killed it. I'm impressed, Marlon Wayans. I wasn't as turned off by Carlton as many others were, mostly because I feel like some people have a rose-colored view of the old Carlton. Old Carlton was not above doing anything illegal. His whole character was that of a young Wall Street yuppie who will do anything for an advantage or money. There's even an old episode where he does insider trading, so he's definitely no angel. Bel-Air just took the worst aspects of that character and fit it into the framework of this show. Yeah, honestly, a lot of the stuff he does seems extreme, but that's only because this is the character written within a drama and not a comedy. The drugs are a bit much, but as a whole, the character motivations are still there and updated for modern audiences. The most updated character has to be Hillary. She's a social media influencer now, and honestly, that's probably the most realistic way you can update the character. I don't think the dumb Valley Girl personality would have played well for this reboot, so the next best thing will be a self-absorbed social media influencer. I liked it, and I think she had some of the best conflicts within the show. Completely revamping her to be more empowered could have backfired, but I'm glad to say it didn't. I like that the attention of the show was spread around evenly. I think if it was just about Will Smith and his problems, it wouldn't have been as interesting, especially since majority of his important moments are lifted directly from the old show. So it was a smart decision to focus mostly on the family and how him moving into their house affected their dynamic. If I had to sum up the Bel-Air characters in one word, it would be flawed. Everybody's character in the show is flawed in one way or another, and it makes the show more compelling to see how they all overcome it. I came into the show with the lowest of expectations and ended up being beyond impressed. The show ended on a bit of a cliffhanger, and hopefully it impressed enough people to get a second season. My grade for Bel-Air is a B. Even if it was a standalone show with no prior inspiration, it would have still been entertaining. Let me know what you thought about the TV show Bel-Air in the comments below, and don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. And until next time, I'll holler at you.